Welcome to this first episode of my Ultimate Excel Dashboard tutorial series. In this tutorial series, we're gonna build this amazing interactive Excel dashboard you see right here. This dashboard is completely built in Excel and it has so many features that you wouldn't expect to be possible in Excel. First of all, we have this beautiful and progressive design in every single element of this dashboard. And with the slicers at the bottom, you can filter your underlying data from basically any angle you like. Every slicer is connected to all the dashboard charts. The filtering functions of these slicers work perfectly together, and you are able to either select only one value per slicer dimension, or if you want to, you can also do a multi-select or filter values. Another custom feature I created is this interactive info button, which allows you to either display or hide an info box that gives you additional information on the tile content. Then I found an excellent way to create multiple tabs inside one tile, which allows you to display different content in the same place via these beautiful tab buttons up there. And to top it all off, I created this huge collapsible settings area, which allows you to instantly modify the visual appearance of your dashboard. In there you can choose between different gradient color themes using these radio buttons. Simply beautiful. And with these modern toggle buttons, you can either enable or disable certain elements and functionalities in your dashboard, like the tab functionality in our tiles or the info buttons. And if you disable and then re-enable elements, they are automatically reset into a predefined default state, which is pretty helpful. Now, in this first episode, we're gonna build a basic interactive dashboard that already has the full filtering functionality. And then in the following tutorials, we're gonna take a deeper and holistic look into specific design topics. We're gonna learn how to automatically refresh the pivot tables and charts with changes in our data, and of course how to build these awesome on-top features I just demonstrated. So without further ado, let's get started. As I got so many requests in the comments to make my files available for download, I decided to launch a brand new website called excelfind.com. On there, you find the Excel files for this and my previous Excel dashboard available for free download. And the good news are, I want to steadily grow this website into the #1 platform for modern and state-of-the-art Excel skills, techniques and resources. So if you want to support me, check it out and share excelfind.com with everyone you think might be interested and benefit from it. And for all of you who wonder which Excel or Microsoft Office version I'm using in this video, I always use the Microsoft Office 365 subscription, which is pretty much the standard today for most people I know and which is required for many features I use in this dashboard. Microsoft constantly adds new awesome and exclusive features, especially to PowerPoint and Excel, and with that Office version you will have all these amazing features available. So if you still work with one of the older versions, I recommend to upgrade to Office 365. I personally got it directly from the official Microsoft online store, probably the most reliable and quickest way to get that current Office version, and I'm gonna link it for you in the description. Now for our basic interactive dashboard, the first thing we need is a good amount of source data. This dashboard will be about measuring the customer success of our hypothetical online shop, and for that we have a bit less than 6,000 rows of data which I generated automatically using a nice VBA script. I'm gonna show you that script at the end of this tutorial series. Each row represents one customer transaction with all sorts of valuable information. So we have the date of the transaction, the way that this customer has been acquired, either organically, through an ad, or it is a returning customer. Then we have information about where this customer lives, which might be relevant for geo or micro-targeting in our marketing strategies. Then what product he bought, the respective price of that product and the number of units. And then based on that, the resulting revenue of that transaction. And we were even able to get information about the delivery performance, so if the delivery was delayed or not, and if the customer returned the product for some reason. And then finally, we asked our customers for feedback on the whole transaction and experience, and they gave us some feedback on a 1 to 5 scale. Yeah, so that's what we got. Now, the first thing we want to do is to put these data into a table. That is really important for multiple reasons. The first reason is it allows us to easily add new data below this table, and then they automatically will be added to the table. And the second reason is we can then reference our dynamic data range by giving this table a name and simply referencing it by that name every time we want to use that data for one of our pivot tables and charts. So let's just call this table data table. That allows us to start preparing our pivot tables and pivot charts for the dashboard. At first, we built a sales revenue line chart, and for that we start by inserting a pivot table. Now we have to select the data, and just to demonstrate you, I'm gonna select the data range manually. And you see it automatically detects this as the table we just defined, which has the name data table. And that means we also can simply type in that table name the next time we want to reference our data. Since we want to have a look at the revenue over time, we simply drag the date field down here into the rows box. As you can see, Excel automatically adds the years and the quarters field, which is pretty helpful in many cases. So now our rows are grouped by these years and quarters. However, we don't need the quarter, so we simply remove it again. And now we have everything we want. Let's just open this up to show you. And now we drag the revenue field into the values box, which then shows us the sum of revenue per year and per month in our pivot table. Now let's insert a pivot chart based on that pivot table. So we simply click on that pivot chart button right there. And as you can see, by default, Excel inserts a bar chart. If we group that, you see the pivot table is now connected to this pivot chart. And for now, we're going to do some basic redesign for this pivot chart. First of all, we're going to change the chart type into line chart because we want to have a line chart. And then we're going to remove certain elements that we don't need in our chart. Because like in many cases, less is more. Okay, now let's quickly format this axis. More specifically, we want to change the numbers format. So we change that category into currency. And we want to have US dollars. There we go. And we set decimal places to 0. That's it. Exactly. Now that's it for now for this chart, so we can move on to the next one, which is the sales map chart. For our sales map chart, we want to visualize our sales revenue by region, to be more specific by US states. For that, we're going to insert a pivot table once again, and this time we can type directly the name. We don't even have to reference that data sheet. Simply type in the data table name that we define, click OK, and we are all set and done. And this time we want to drag the state field into the columns area. There we have our US states. Beautiful. And we drag the revenue field into the values area. And there we have our revenue by region. Just like before, we try to insert the pivot chart directly based on the pivot table. And there we have a nice bar chart. The problem is if we try to change the chart type into map chart, what you see is there is no map chart option. For some reason, it's not in there. And we have to do this in another way. One thing we try is directly inserting a map chart, and then we get this alert which says you can create this chart type with data inside a pivot table. Please select a different chart type or copy the data outside of the pivot table. I don't know why that is the case, but Excel gives us some recommendation on what we should do, so we simply do that. Yeah, we copy the state names outside of the pivot table, type in total revenue. And now we can use the getPivotData function. The getPivotData function is a really cool function because you can reference specific values within a pivot table, and then the cell value will behave just like if it was inside the pivot table. So if you do any filtering in the pivot table, in the original pivot table, this referencing cell will just behave like it was in this pivot table, and this filtering will be applied to this cell as well. Now that we have created that dynamic copy of the pivot table, we can select the whole range and insert a maps chart directly. And as you see, this time it works. For now, it shows us the whole world. And before any data is displayed, we have to accept that our data will be sent to Bing. And there we go. Now we have our data beautifully visualized. It automatically detected all the states correctly. So we can move on with making some basic adjustments, which is first of all removing the title. And then we right click on the data series and click Format Data Series. And that opens the data series options area. And there you have a field which says Map Area. Here we want to select only regions with data. Now only the regions with data obviously are displayed. That's exactly what we want. And just as a side note, this map chart is a very good example for a feature that is only available in the latest Excel versions. So if you use an older version, it is very likely that it is not available. The next two charts will both be beautiful donut charts. Generally, I really don't like pie charts from a visual standpoint. Donut charts, on the other hand, can be designed to look beautiful if you do it the right way. Just like before, we start by inserting a pivot table and reference our source data by the name that we just gave to our source data table, which is data table. Look how easy it is. And now we can drag the delivery performance field down there into the rows box. Shows us the two values. And then we drag the revenue field into the values box. But this time we are not interested in the sum of revenue, which is the function applied by default, but we want to have the number of transactions. For that we go to the field settings and change the summarize by function to count, because that gives us the count, the number of transactions. And now we have displayed how many transactions have been delayed or on time. As we want to display the percentage of on-time deliveries in the center of the donut chart, but we don't want to use the native chart labels as they sometimes change positions with different values, we're going to use a fixed text field, and to create the value for that text field, we simply calculate the percentage outside of the pivot table. After that, we're going to select a cell within the pivot table and insert a pivot chart. By default, it's a bar chart again, so we're going to change the chart type to pie, and in the pie category, we have the donut option. There we go. At first, we remove the title, and then we have to make a quick adjustment to the pivot table, more precisely to the order of the values, because what we want is the good value, the on-time transactions in this case, start at 12 o'clock and then go clockwise to the right in our donut charts. We can do that by simply changing the sorting order of the rows to the scanning. Perfect. That's it for the chart. Now we only need the chart label, the percentage label, and for that we're going to insert a text box. Now in this text box we don't want to have a static value like you normally have in text boxes, but we want to have a value based on a cell reference. And for all of you who don't know how to do this, it's actually pretty easy. Simply select the text box, but then instead of directly writing into that text box, you have to click into the formula bar up there. And there we can put in a normal cell reference like we would do for any other cell. Now we only adjust the font size and the text alignment. And that's already it for this chart. For the return rate donut chart, it will be more or less the same procedure. We start again by inserting a pivot table, referencing our data table, and this time we drag the return field into the rows area, and there we have our both values yes or no. And again, we drag the revenue into the values box and change the summarizing function to count, because we are still interested in the number of transactions. Before we insert the pivot charts, we don't want to forget to calculate the percentage value again for our text label. And this time we will calculate the bad value, so the return rate. Obviously, the number of returns is something that we want to be as low as possible. Let's change that to percentage. Pretty good. And now we can insert our pivot chart like before. Gonna change the chart type to the donut type again. And there we have it. This time the order of the row values is already correct, because we want to have the no returns, the good value, still be the one starting at 12 o'clock to the right clockwise. And yeah, now let's insert the text label and reference the percentage value that we just calculated. Now we simply adjust the text size, and let's do it again. Here we go. And the text alignment. And that's already it with the preparation of these donut charts. I admit they don't look any pretty at the moment, but I promise they will when we are done with the actual dashboard design. The next chart will be about the customer acquisition type, and for that we're going to use an entirely new chart type, which is, by the way, pretty popular among many people in the business world, and again only available in the more recent versions of Microsoft Office. You guessed it, I'm talking about the waterfall chart. Again, we're gonna need a pivot chart, so let's insert one and reference our source data just like before. There we go. And this time we are interested in the customer acquisition type, so we're going to drag that into the rows box. And we're going to drag the revenue field into the values box. And once again, we want to have the number of transactions, so we're going to change the summarizing function to count. Beautiful. Now let's insert a pivot chart for this pivot table and change the chart type to the waterfall type. There it is. And what is that? Oh man, seems like it doesn't work either. It's the same message like for the maps chart before, which recommends to copy the data outside of the table. Yeah, so I guess we have to do that. Hope they fix that. But anyway, the good thing about this is that now we are able to adjust the order of these row elements in any way we want, even in a way that wouldn't be possible within a pivot table. So that's a good thing, yeah? And then we're going to use the getPivotData function to reference our pivot data values again. This time we also have to include the total. In the charts before we didn't include that because it wasn't necessary, but for the waterfall chart it is necessary because this will be a bar that summarizes all the other bars left to it. And now that we have our data set up, we can insert the waterfall chart. There we go. Let's just make it a bit bigger and remove these legend and title elements. And this one. Now, one problem with the setup of this chart so far is that the total bar isn't configured as a total bar. It's just another bar on top of the others. To fix that, we simply right-click on this specific data point and click on Format Data Point. And there we have the option Set as Total. Just say yes, do that, and there we go. That's how our waterfall chart should look like. If you redo it, it's just another bar, and this way it works as a total. Beautiful. We are almost done with the chart preparation, only one chart to go. The last chart will visualize the customer satisfaction split by product. Let's insert another pivot table. And this time we're going to build a two-dimensional pivot table. We start by dragging the customer satisfaction field into the rows box. And if you have a close look at the row values, you see why it is important to have these numbers from 1 to 5 in front of the description, because that ensures the correct order of these row elements. As the next step, let's drag the revenue field into the values box and adjust the summarizing function to count again, because we want to have the number of transactions again. And for the columns box, we want to have the product field in there. And now we have our two-dimensional pivot table. Beautiful. This allows us to insert a pivot chart. And now we change the chart type to a normalized horizontal bar chart. It is called 100% stacked bar chart in Excel. There we go. Oh, and I see we have to switch the product and the customer satisfaction field. And as you can see, we can do that directly in the pivot chart, which is pretty cool. Now we want to have it starting with product 1 at the top. So let's change the sorting order to descending and remove those excess lines. Awesome, that's it, we've done it. We just prepared all the required pivot charts for our dashboard. Now let's move on to the fun part. Booyah! As you can see, for the basic dashboard design, I already prepared a fancy background and a beautiful gradient tile design for our dashboard charts and slices. But no worries, I will cover how to prepare all of this in the next episode of this tutorial series. Since it takes a little time and I want to cover different design variants, I decided to make it a separate video. Now, let's fill this beautiful dashboard tile design with some life, and for that we want to insert a header by inserting a text box, changing the text size to 32, and then just type in whatever name you want to give our dashboard. In our case, we call it Customer Success Dashboard because that is what it is. Just resize it, then right click on it to format this shape. Let's just remove the fill and remove the line. And then let's change the color to white and align it to center and the middle. And now, finally, we can reposition it to a good position. Perfect. Next, we want to insert titles for our 4 beautiful tiles. And for that, we're going to need a background. We don't just want to simply add titles, but we want to put them inside a nice background box, for which we use a rounded rectangle, and we put the roundness to a maximum. Make it a bit bigger, and then we change the fill to white and remove the line. And then we change the transparency to, let's see, 85. Let's make it a bit less. Let's make it 80%. So that it's really close to the background, but still differentiates from it. And yeah, I think that looks pretty nice. Now we duplicate this 3 times and place it in the other 3 tiles. That's the first one. And then the second one. And we always try to find the exact same relative position within the tiles. The best way to do these minor position changes is to use your arrow keys. And there we go. Now we have all those nice title background boxes. So let's put some content in there. Before we put the actual titles in there, we want to insert some good looking icons. And for that, we're going to make use of the integrated icon library. That is such an amazing feature in Office 365, I can tell ya. I still remember in my last dashboard videos I got so many requests about where I got these awesome icons from, and this integrated library is the answer. Microsoft constantly extended this icon library over the last few months, so now with the current Office version, link is in the description, you have a huge amount of good looking icons available. Now for our purpose, let's select these 4 and insert them. There we have them. Let's start by changing the color to white. And since we have all 4 selected, we can change the size of all these at the same time. Let's make it maybe a bit bigger. Let's make it 0.3 should be good. Perfect. And now let's position them inside these transparent background boxes. The reason why I really prefer these integrated icons over icons from external sources is that they are flat, they look beautiful, and the best thing of all is that they are fully customizable inside of Excel. So for example, if you want to adjust the color of one of these icons, you can easily do that within Excel and change it to any color you want. And that is not the case if you use an external source like a website for free icons, for example. Now that we have our icons in place, we want to add the tile titles. For that, we simply copy the header title, drag it down, and change the text size to 14. Then let's resize this text box and change the text in there. For the first tile, we're going to call it sales because in there we will have the sales revenue line chart and the sales revenue map chart. And we adjust the size of this transparent background box so that it fits the length of our title text. Now let's copy that title over to the next tile and change the text accordingly. This tile will be called deliveries because in there we will put our 2 donor charts that cover the delivery performance and the return rate. Okay. Now let's copy it another time for the next tile, which will all be about customer acquisition. Customer acquisition obviously is a longer word or 2 longer words, so we have to enlarge the text box. And then in the same way, we have to enlarge the background box as well to make it look good. And then we'll copy over that title to the last tile, which is the customer satisfaction tile. Gonna enlarge this box as well. And that's already it. Now we are set and ready to insert the pivot charts that we just prepared a few minutes ago. We're gonna start with the sales revenue line chart. We cut it and paste it here. And right now it obviously looks like a misfit from a visual standpoint, but we're gonna redesign it in only a few simple steps to make it look beautiful. We start by making use of this predefined chart design that you can find in the Chart Design tab. And then we're gonna format the chart area to remove the fill and the borderline. Let's resize this chart to make it fit in there approximately. And we have to keep in mind to leave some space on the right side because there we want to add the sales revenue map chart later on. Now, one big issue here is that the share of the time axis with its labels is more than 1/3 of the whole chart area. And we want to have more space for the actual chart content without losing the readability of the chart, which means we still want to have months and years displayed for this axis. So what we're going to do is first we reduce the text size of these labels. Now we have every month displayed in there, but if we only had every second month displayed, the readability would be just as good. So let's open the Format Axis section on the right. At Axis Position we select On Tick Marks. And then the important part, in the Label section there we unselect the Multi-Level Category Labels option. That removes the year labels for a second, but then by specifying the interval unit, and we go with 2 here, the years appear back again and the whole axis area is much smaller now. Now there's just only one small detail I would like to add. For that you have to click on the data series and there you can change the line design to gradient line. Then remove those middle colors and change the right color to red. By default, the angle is 90 degrees, and now if we push that one to a position of 50%, the effect you get is that the lowest values will be colored in this gradient red. So the bad values will be slightly red, and I think that's just a beautiful visualization of bad or good values if you like. But for this dashboard, I decided to just play around with different shades of red. We continue with inserting the second chart, which is the sales revenue map chart. We cut it and then paste it in here. And the first thing that we want to do is to format the chart area by removing the fill and removing the border line. Then I decided to also remove the legend because we don't need it actually if we design it the right way. And then we resize it and bring it into a nice position where it perfectly fits. Color-wise, the adjustments will be pretty simple. We just right-click on the map and click on Format Data Series. And in the formatting section, we change the color for the highest value to red and for the lowest value to white. And that's already it for this chart. The next two pivot charts to insert are the two donut charts, and they will require a little more effort, but they will look amazing in the end. Alright. We start with the delivery performance chart, and we're gonna cut both the chart and the text field label and paste it in here. You directly see one problem because obviously this reference doesn't work. There's nothing showing up in there. And the problem is that we need to manually add the sheet name of the data sheet in there. So let's quickly do that. Delivery performance donut. Boom, and there you see there's the number. So that's how to fix that. We're gonna remove that legend. And then we resize this chart area to 1.5 and 1.5. Now let's right click on it and click on Format Chart Area to remove the fill and the borderline. Then we want to change the color of the data series. Let's quickly drag that down here to see it better. We click on it and change the fill to solid fill, which will make both data points white. And we set the border to solid line as well. And for our second data point, we actually wanted to have no fill. So we click on that specific data point and set it to no fill. And since we already set that border to solid line, it now looks like this, which is beautiful. And finally, we set the donut hole size to 85%, and that gives this chart its final look. Now for the label, we want to start by removing the fill as well and the line, changing the color to white, and adjusting the text size to, let's say, 28. Then we resize this text box and place it somewhat in the center of this beautiful donut chart. Not exactly in the center because we want to place another label right below it that gives us more information about what that percentage number actually means, right? So we insert another text box. And there we specify this percentage by writing on time. So now it says, okay, we have 67% of our deliveries on time. A good advice at this point is that the numbers label and the descriptive label below should have approximately the same width. That just gives it a clean look. And right now both are not perfectly centered together, so let's just move them a little bit up. I thought it would be a great idea to not leave the space below that chart unused, so I decided to add some additional information on the target value that we want this specific value to be. For that, we start by inserting a line To visually separate this additional information from the chart, we make sure that this line is perfectly horizontal, which it obviously is, and change the color to white and the width to 1 point. Then we reposition it and just try to make it perfectly centered by selecting the chart area, the line, and align it to center. And then we just copy this descriptive label, put it down here, and then change the text to target 70% because we want to be 70% on time with our deliveries. Then one thing, let's make that word target bold to stand a little bit out. And that's already it for this beautiful donut chart. Okay, now let's replicate this exact redesign process for the other donut chart, the return rate donut chart. And for that, we're gonna cut the chart plus the text field label and paste it into our dashboard sheet. And again, we have to fix the issue with our text field label and the broken cell reference. So let's insert the name of the return rate donut sheet into that reference. And now it works again. Awesome. So then we can continue by removing this legend and formatting the chart area, setting it to no fill and no line. And then we're going to resize it to the same size like before, 1.5 and 1.5. Let's just drag it down there to see it better. And now let's recolor the data series, make it all white for a moment and set it to solid line. And then let's remove the fill for this specific data point. Exactly like this. Let's have a quick look what the line width is here. Let's set it to 1 point and do the same for this line as well. And now we only have to adjust the donut hole size and set it to 85%. Perfect. Let's just quickly lay it over the other donut chart to check if it has all the same proportions. And that's the case, so we can continue with the label again. For the label, we want to set it to no fill and no line. Make the text white and set it to 28. Exactly. Make the text feel a bit smaller. Place it right there. Now we have to make sure that both these donut charts and labels are all on the same height. You could either do this by aligning, or you just overlay it and then use your arrow keys to move it to the right. That's what we're gonna do. Looks good. We do the same for our numbers label. Perfect. Now let's just copy these other 3 elements and overlay them like this. Perfect. And move them to the right. And there we go. That looks pretty good. Now we just have to change the text contents. So we're going to change the on time into returns because we have 10% returns. And for our target value, we're going to set it to 8%. We are really ambitious. Yeah, and that's it for these donut charts. Don't they look beautiful? Now let's move on to the waterfall chart. Let's start by going to the Customer Acquisition Waterfall tab, cut the chart and paste it into the dashboard sheet. There it is. Let's make it a bit smaller and format the chart area. Because again, we want to remove the fill and the borderline. Exactly. Then we're gonna get rid of this y-axis because we have the values already in the labels above the bars. That should be enough. And then we're gonna try to make it fit perfectly into this tile. Let's change the color of these data labels to white, and then we're gonna change the format of these data labels. First of all, the label position, let's center it. And for the numbers format, I'm gonna change that to number with 0 decimal places. Exactly like this. For our labels at the bottom, I'm gonna change that color to white, make it a bit bigger, like this. Perfect. And then let's move the whole thing a bit up so that the line of the chart, the axis line, is approximately on the same height like the other two lines on the left. Now we can take care of the bars themselves. First of all, we want to change the border of these bars, make them a solid line, change the width to 1 point and the color to white, exactly like this. And now we're going to take care of the fill. We go there and change the fill of all these bars to gradient fill. Then we're going to remove those middle colors, and then we change the colors. So for the left one, we want to make it white. Yes, and for the right one, we want to make it purple. You find it down there, the standard colors, exactly like this. And now really important, we set the transparency for the purple one to 50 and for the white one to 50 as well. And this gives us this beautiful look. Now we just change the angle to 120 degrees to twist it a little bit. And something pretty common for waterfall charts is that the total bar has a different color than all the other bars. So let's just change that white into this red, and this gives us this beautiful gradient style for the whole chart. Eventually, we can move on to our final chart, which will be our customer satisfaction horizontal bar chart. Again, we're gonna cut and paste it into our dashboard sheet and make it somehow fit into that tile for the moment. Now, the first thing we want to address is this legend, because we want to reposition it and bring it to the bottom instead of the right side, because that makes the whole space be used more efficiently. And let's just change the text size to 7 for this legend. And then we're going to format the chart area, set it to no fill and no line. And then we click on one of these data series and adjust the gap width between the bars to something close to, well, I would say something close to 100 should be fine, yes. Well, I decided to go to the Design tab and add a chart element that we already removed, but I think it might make sense. So we add vertical grid lines in here, because then we don't have to put labels onto the bars, because you somehow know at what percentage line you are. I just want to change the color of these to something, to a slight gray. Maybe that one, or that one, and reduce the width of that. Then for these product labels, we're gonna change the color to white. And we're gonna do the same for the percentage labels down there. Exactly. Then the next thing we want to do is, just like before for the waterfall chart, we want to add lines, so border lines, to the bars. And we have to do this for every single data series. You see, every color in there is considered to be a separate data series. And I just saw, of course, I want to make that legend text down there at the bottom also white instead of that dark gray. And I think we should maybe slightly reposition and resize this chart to make it more visually appealing. The problem I see arising now is that our vertical grid lines somehow disappear, but we can easily fix that by manually setting the axis major unit interval. There we go, to 0.2. And there we have our 20% steps again. And for the grid lines themselves, I think it might make sense to change something. I'm not really satisfied with it now. Maybe change the color, or we try to play around with transparency like this. I think that is pretty good. Let's leave it like this. Now the last thing to deal with for this chart is the color of these data series. I decided to make it a gradient style, a gradient fill for all these bars, always with two slightly different colors. So for the bad data series, so the very low and low, we're gonna use some red shades. And for the middle one, we're gonna use a combination of white and some slight gray. And then for the good ones, so the high and very high satisfaction data series, we're gonna use some shades of green. For those who are wondering, some of these colors are normal theme colors or standard colors, and then some others are recently saved colors, so something that I customized myself with the color tool, and that's why they are still saved in the recent colors down there. And now we have completed the next major part for this basic version of the dashboard. The last thing we definitely need to add, because we want to make this a fully interactive dashboard, is, you guessed it, beautiful interactive slicers for our pivot charts. And you might wonder, why does this guy say beautiful slices? Because if you are familiar with the Excel slicers for pivot tables and charts, you know that the default and even the alternative styles look not really good. Pretty old-fashioned, and they definitely wouldn't fit into this dashboard that we just created. But no worries, I prepared a beautiful state-of-the-art and modern slicer design that perfectly fits into this dashboard, so it will look beautiful as promised. But before we talk about slicer design, we first have to insert them. So let's select one of these pivot charts, click on the Insert tab, and there we have the slicers. Now this opens up this pop-up window where we can select what dimensions we want to have slicers for. We're gonna select years, product, custom acquisition type, and state. These are the 4 slices that we want to have, and there they are. Not really beautiful, right? Anyway, let's put them next to each other so that we can have a good look at them. Now the first thing to do is select all 4 slices and right-click on them, and then go to Slicer Settings. And in there you see the option Hide Items with No Data, and that is something that we want to do. I definitely recommend it because, for example, in the Years tab you see all these unnecessary fields that we don't need. That will hide them. And now that we have all 4 slicers selected, let's just connect them to all the other pivot charts, because currently they are only connected to our fancy line chart up there. And we have to click on Report Connections. Oh, okay, it seems like we cannot do that for all 4 at once, so we have to do it slicer by slicer. We right-click on the first one and go to Report Connections, and that opens up this pop-up window where we simply select all these pivot tables. You see it is pivot tables, but I mean these pivot tables are directly connected to these pivot charts, so that's basically the same. And now we just do this 3 more times for the other 3 slicers. For the product slicer, and for the customer acquisition slicer, and finally for our state slicer. There we go. And now we can fully focus on the slicer design. As I told you before, I already prepared a custom, advanced and modern slicer design, and I think many of you are interested in how to do that. This will be covered in detail in the 3rd episode of this Ultimate Dashboard tutorial series. In there I will show you everything like the general style, this beautiful hover effect, and the styles of selected and unselected items. But for now, let's just enjoy the beauty of it and make it fit into our black slicer area. To make them perfectly fit, you should make use of the options you have above there in the Slicer tab, which allows you to define how many columns you want to have and what is the height and width of these columns. So for our first slicer, we're gonna make it 2 columns and slightly adjust the proportions of this slicer. For the second slicer, it makes sense to make it 3 columns since we have 5 elements in total in there. And for the third one, we make it 2 columns again. And you always have to play around with the proportions of these slices to make everything visible, because if there's not enough space, it will just cut off words. Sometimes it is not avoidable, but you should make sure that at least most of the content within these slices is fully visible, and if not, that it is still understandable. And that is it, folks. Let's have a quick look at what our final dashboard is capable of doing. It allows us to slice our huge amount of data by basically any dimension we want. So for example, we can filter our dashboard charts by single years, or we can even apply multi-select so that multiple years can be selected. Like here we have 2018 and 2019 as you see. And we can apply the same for the product slices. So let's for example slice our data down to product 2 to 4, or alternatively 3 to 5. Everything is possible with this basic interactive Excel dashboard. And just as a recap, what makes this dashboard really powerful is that all these slicers down there are working together. That means if you filter within one slicer and then you also filter within another slicer, all these filters are active at the same time, and that allows you to slice through your data to get even the smallest data cube within your big data cube. I hope you liked this tutorial. Again, I recommend to check out my website excelfind.com. There you will find all the files of this dashboard tutorial series for free download. And on top of that, you will find so much valuable Excel knowledge and resources there. So just take a look, and I appreciate anyone who shares it and spreads the word. That's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe and do not miss out on the next awesome video in this tutorial series. Cheers!